Hello and welcome to Self-Publishing with ALLi, the podcast that brings you all the advice, news, and inspiration an indie author needs today. Thanks to our sponsor, BookVault.app. They enable authors to sell high-quality print-on-demand books, including stunning special editions, directly to readers worldwide. And today, you're listening to our creative self-publishing stream. It's brought to you by Orna Ross's Go Creative program, helping authors harness the power of creative flow in writing and publishing. And now, here's Orna Ross and Joanna Penn with today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joanna. Hello, everyone.
Yes, well, we are back, and today we're going to talk about our sort of personal updates, what we've been doing, but around the theme of creative confidence and finding your author voice. Now, we've been talking about this sort of privately, and we really wanted to get into it deeper. So just as a sort of introduction, when we're talking about author voice, this is the recognizable fingerprint of your writing, your tone, your worldview, the themes that keep coming up, the obsessions you return to over and over again. A lot of your words, your characters, plot elements, topics, if nonfiction, memoir. It's like, oh yeah, for me, it's like, oh yeah, this is a J.F.Penn book, or, you know, or Orna, it's an Orna Ross poem or something like that. And creative confidence, this, I'm obsessed with this at the moment, is this self-belief that you can keep producing original work over time. Even if you feel empty, you're confident that it's going to come back. I guess also the confidence to move out of your comfort zone, try other genres, try other ways of publishing, and that as a creative person, you will figure it out along the way. And I feel like this is so important in this sort of age of generative AI. People are worried about things impacting their creativity. And so we're going to talk a bit about these topics around our personal themes today. But I wanted to start off now, Orna, you've had a big life event, and I wondered if maybe you could talk about that in relation to this confidence when big things happen and making space and returning to creativity again.
Yes, so for those who don't know, and thank you for the many of you who do know and the lovely messages and so on that I've received over the last while. My mum passed away at the end of April. After a long illness and then a quite intense illness in the last 6 months of her life. So I took a step back earlier on this year to focus on that, and because I wanted to be around and there for the family and just to be present for such a huge event as well. So, yeah, a lot of people have been talking about that hiatus and what it means and what I'm going to do and, you know, what my plans are. And I thought it would be interesting, as this was our topic for this time, to talk a little bit about that, because I think when we stop as creatives, and whether that's enforced because, you know, of a life event or maybe just because we find ourselves blocked or whatever, our thinking mind is always there trying to kind of hurry us on, and always feels that we're not doing enough and is always kind of very focused on the outer stuff. So as a more experienced creative who's been doing this for a very long time, I kind of know now that there is a deeper rhythm there, and that the stuff that life is bringing up is probably going to feed into, you know, what's coming back out. It's different for everyone, obviously, but I think that creative confidence, or you can feel creatively confident once you know how the creative process works and you know how to consciously tap it. And I think, you know, that applies at any stage, whether you're just beginning or whether you're further on. Certainly for me, when I began to be, you know, more experienced as a creative, and particularly when I became interested in the whole idea of applying the creative process to life, understanding how that process worked really helped me. And that was one of the ways that I kind of tapped into it during this time. So I realise now that the creative process isn't about doing, that there are 7 stages, and some of those stages are very much about stillness and paying attention to what's beneath rather than, you know, the surface stuff. And so that sometimes it's, about expressing stuff and taking actions, but sometimes it's just about embracing uncertainty and going a bit deeper. And once we have a trust in the process itself and a creative practice that keeps us connected, I think no matter what comes along, we can still feel confident that whatever is happening is unfolding the way it should.
Mm. Yeah, and obviously I'm sorry about your mum, and I know people listening are sorry about that. And a lot of people will understand what you're going through because the death of a parent obviously should happen to most people in a normal life. But I guess grief specifically is a really tough one, and it might be grief about death, it might be grief about other losses. Different times in our life we experience grief. Have you found that the experience of grief in particular has changed your experience of what I feel as emptiness sometimes? It's like, oh my goodness, I can never write again. There's that moment. Often it's very momentary, this sort of I am empty. And you described it there as sort of stillness and being able to go deeper. But I have felt that, oh my goodness, I am empty kind of moment. So have you experienced that as part of it?
I haven't personally in this time experienced it around writing. So I've stayed connected to writing, but not being able to write the big project. So I always have one big book. That's how I think of it. But I have a free writing practice every day where I write just whatever hops into my head, and that's handwritten. And I was able to sustain that. And I often find that when I'm free writing, I the part of me that trusts the process rises to the surface and reassures me, So I'm grateful to have that in place, because I think without it, that I would feel stopped by a wall almost. And definitely right now, there are things that I'm not capable of doing. So more on the publishing side, I just can't go there. And I'm completely stopped on some things. I took a hiatus from some other things. So yeah, I'm definitely feeling I'm not at my normal rhythm and pace, and I don't expect to be, unless this feeling just disappears overnight, which doesn't feel like it will. I don't expect to be in my normal pace for the next month or two.
No, absolutely, or longer. And I think that's important for us all. I know some people listening, chronic illness, I think periods of chronic illness can have this same impact. But trusting the process, I guess why I keep wanting to talk about this creative confidence topic is because, people will say to me, oh, you're so confident. And I've certainly felt that with you. I've known you more than a decade now. And when I met you, I was like, oh my goodness, Orna's just so experienced and confident. And it's quite funny to me that people now, say things to me in the same way. If people don't have that daily practice like you, or don't have the sort of publishing history, and that's what I lean on. I don't have a daily writing practice like you, but I look at what I did a few months ago or last week or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I know this will come round again. Like, it's a creative cycle, and I know that I just have the confidence that it will come back. So if people listening, they're like, yeah, but I'm not as experienced, I don't have the years of that. What do you think that starting on that kind of daily practice, or how do people get over that initial sense of confidence?
Yeah, I definitely feel that a practice is needed and helpful at every stage, but particularly when you're starting out. So, what blocks you or stops you moving forward is some kind of disconnection from either yourself or your normal routine. So when you're starting out as a writer, there are loads of things you don't know about yourself that you need to know to write with confidence, about your values and what matters to you, all of that. And so, yeah, I think a writing practice, and I also have a meditation practice, I think those two things for me are very core to staying connected, no matter what's going on, kind of thing. The other part that I think is really important, and we can forget about it because it doesn't seem relevant, is the self-care thing. When we're tired, when we're stressed, if we're neglecting our physical needs, that cuts off creative flow. There is no doubt about that. And the other thing is limiting beliefs and habitual thoughts and ideas and concepts that we carry about ourselves or the job in hand that, stop us from being able to tackle it with confidence. All of those, to my mind, are eased or dissolved completely by a creative practice that keeps you in touch with your own creative flow, which is a deeper thing. And the thing is that the more you want to get on and write the book, the less you want to do these things, and the more irrelevant they can feel. But from my own experience and my observation, there are certain kinds of writers who really benefit from creative practice. I mean, to an extraordinary extent. And I've never seen anyone who doesn't benefit to some degree.
I think my creative practice is writing books.
Yes.
I almost feel, and I do journal. I have a journal right next to me, and I almost call it, I binge write. And when I need to journal, I will go and I will journal and I will write pages and pages and pages, rather than the kind of everyday thing. So I have that kind of practice. But let's also then.
You also, sorry, if just to cut across you also walk.
Yes, that's my meditation, I think.
And we all have that experience with aerobic physical activity of the ideas coming to us. So creative practice doesn't necessarily have to mean something that looks creative. It's more what generates your own creative flow. So and I do think it's useful to separate our creative work, which might be, writing the book, or it might be some publishing task or whatever is the thing that you're trying to do at the moment, to separate that from a creative practice that is done for no other reason other than to do it. The box is ticked once you've done it. It's not about quality, or it's not about achieving something. It's disconnected from that achiever mind. That's kind of what I mean by practice, just as clarity.
Yeah, and I guess for people listening as well, obviously we're quite different. And so that's important, whatever you, the listener, find useful. But I feel like sometimes, the indie movement as such, we can focus sometimes on the output, the sort of market pressures, the expectations. And I sometimes feel like people lose creative confidence when maybe they're trying to write to market when it doesn't suit them, or they're comparing themselves with authors who've done things in a certain way, and they're like, oh well, I'm not that good, and so we're always comparing things that make us feel less confident, I guess. And then we get the fear of criticism as well, and always thinking of what other people think of us. And I feel like I definitely had that a lot more when I was starting out. I have that less now, although I still do. I mean, there were years when I didn't really talk about my obsession with memento mori and death culture and my kind of gothic interests, that I thought people would think I was a weirdo. And now I don't really mind. And there's a lot of authors who are weirdos anyway. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think if whenever we are being creative and throwing that ball out there and trying to catch up with it, it's going to feel that way. You feel that sense of exposure and rawness, and that can stop us. And I think, the more you do it, the more you realize, well, that's part of it. And the more, I think confidence and resilience are very connected in that way. And there is a whole side of this that you can only do it by doing it. And you can't be an experienced creative until you actually have done quite a bit of creating. That's just the way it is. So some of this, can't be dealt with. It's just about, you will feel it, you will experience it, you will go through it, and you keep going. And then eventually you get to a point where, yes, you still feel it, but not as often or not as intensely. Or even if you do feel it very intensely, I felt this before, I've come out of it. It's not going to kill me, do my writing.
Yeah, it will come back. Well, let's then talk about author voice, because I absolutely remember I was in Australia and I was going to these writing conferences, mostly sort of peopled by literary writers doing talks, and this sort of, you must find your author voice. And I would always write notes going, how do I do that? And this was before really I'd written anything. So I was going to all the conferences and trying to learn about how to do it. But exactly what you've just said, you only sort of can find your author voice by actually writing. And I feel like maybe I found it with my book Desecration, which was my 5th novel. And then eventually I actually went back and rewrote the first couple. And that actually helped because I felt it sort of deepened my voice. But why does voice matter? Like, why is author voice something that we obsess with in this industry, or in all creative industries, perhaps?
Yeah, all creative industries, I think. And it's such an unhelpful term because, at the beginning, what even is it?
Yeah.
How will I know? How do I recognize it? How do I improve it? Yeah. But it does matter because it's one of those indefinable creative things that's really hard to explain, but it does make you stand out. It's what your reader is attracted to, even if they don't understand that. It makes, your books consistent across different books and even across different genre and formats, certainly. And writers with a strong voice are writers who make more money and sell more books and attract more readers. And also, I think for us ourselves, there's this whole idea of, the more we have expressed ourselves, the more, in inverted commas, creative we have been, the more pride we can take in our work. We have done that thing, that exposing, brave thing of putting ourselves out there, of expressing ourselves. And so I think it is really important, but I know none of that helps us to find it.
Yeah. And it's funny because I also think I had this, I won't call it a block, but I had a bit of a wall perhaps around thinking that every book we wrote, there has to be something new in it. Like, oh, I can't write about another crypt or another storm in my fiction because I've done that before. And then I kind of started to understand that these same themes, the same images and settings and types of characters, they are part of our author voice. And you just said part of the voice is what the reader is attracted to in our writing, but it's also what we're attracted to. Like, we're only writing about things that we're attracted to. So I have storms in almost every book, some kind of storm. I have strong female characters who fight for family, often child-free because I'm child-free, and sisters in particular come up over and over again. I have 2 sisters, religious themes and settings, and then although, as you know, I'm not a Christian, I'm kind of obsessed with religion. So I've got religious relics and catacombs and religious organizations and places, and I relaxed around not repeating myself and realized that those elements that I love are also elements that my readers love. And so if I suddenly started doing completely different things, I mean, maybe I will at some point, but returning to the things we love is also part of our voice, I guess. So what are some of your things?
Yeah, definitely. I think of them as my obsessions, mini and, minor and major. So for me, the past, it has to be set in the past or I'm just not inspired. So I will never write sci-fi or, if it isn't happening in the past, it just doesn't seem to engage me. And I realized after a long time that was also about memory and how we remember and what we remember and how we, different people remember things differently and all of that. That's really rich territory for me and comes up again and again. And I write about death, but from a viewpoint of resurrection, sort of what comes after the killing and the war. And I'm really interested in intimate war. So I have one novel that's very obviously about civil war, but I think of all my fiction and lots of my poetry as well as being about that. And I'm very interested in the layers of character and relationships. So I'm less interested in action, though I do like to do a twist and a fairly tightly plotted piece. I love the movement of the story, but if it doesn't happen with layered sort of relationships and twists and turns of a psychological and character nature, then I'm not interested really. And then just physical things that turn up. Ireland, obviously, a lot of my work is set there. And the sea is almost always there, or certainly a body of water in some shape or form. So,
And this is important because you mentioned Ireland there. So you are, if people don't know, you're Irish. They might not know. I mean, what is that funny accent you have? But no, you're Irish, but you don't live in Ireland, and you haven't lived in Ireland for a long time, right? So, and I almost find that in itself, your worldview is different to somebody, an Irish person who stayed in Ireland. And in the same way, I left for 12 years or whatever, and have worked all over the place and have come back to England. And I'm actually at the moment really kind of delving into what it means, what home means. And I was born in Somerset, where I live now, and I'm back in Somerset, and it brings up a lot of kind of complicated things. So I'm really exploring that too. And so I feel like the places that form our unique voice, I mean, neither of us could write the other person's thing.
no.
I mean, I might write a story that has something Irish in at some point because I go there as a tourist. And you could write something set in Somerset or whatever, but it's never going to be that. And that's part of our voice too, isn't it? Really leaning into what makes us us.
Yeah, definitely. And very often for a lot of writers, it's the childhood stuff in some shape or form that's still kind of obsessing us in later life. And that happens over and over. I think there are things that come along as well once you're writing that help you to develop your voice, and maybe even find, but certainly develop it. For me, I started off writing as a journalist, and that teaches you to kind of think about your editor and what they want, the audience, what they want, being useful, all those kinds of things, which are really important in writing, but you lean very heavily into that. When I came to writing fiction, I had to unlearn a lot of that and trust myself. And I found that poetry really helped me to do that, because in a poem, you can follow the images and the rhythm and sensation. And because it's small, the stakes are lower. And what I really learned from poetry was that the voice of an individual poems, the images you use in those, can be really quite different. So the opposite to what we were talking about a minute ago, the stuff that turns up all the time, you can, in a short poem, go places that you wouldn't be able to go if you were thinking about writing a long book. And it really helped me to understand that different parts of me have different voices. And, I knew that and was expressing that through genre, but that each of those genre needed a slightly different voice. Still me, but obviously if I'm speaking as a poet, I'm not going to use quite the same word choices as I'm speaking, say, as director of ALLi. It's going to be different. All these different parts we're both multi-passionate creatives who do lots of different things. And, so then the voice can be, it's the same voice, but it's also a little bit different, so in a subtle way.
Well, it's really interesting then. You said there about being a journalist and having to unlearn things. And I was thinking about, back when I was a business consultant. So for people who don't know, I was 11 years. I used to implement accounts payable systems into corporates. I was that's what I did. And it's crazy because I used to write technical specifications. That was a lot of my job. So I would be the person in between the business and the programmers. So all the writing I did was technical. And then when I started to get into creative writing and I was like, I have a lot to unlearn. So it's really interesting that we had to unlearn things. And at this point, I think we're way beyond having to unlearn stuff, and we're more about learning new skills. But it's, I learned to relax, and I call it relaxing because I feel like my writing was uptight because everything I did with technical writing and probably with journalism was cutting out any voice or any opinion or anything that was me. And I learned to relax through blogging and podcasting. And I think if people go back and listen to me back in 2009, 2010, or look at my early YouTube videos, which are still there, I am so uptight. You know what I mean? And it's so crazy to think that now. But I feel like part of finding your voice is almost relaxing. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely do think so. And, unlearning, I suppose, is part of that. And still, I feel sometimes, that there are things I need to let go, which is part of the same thing. So, yeah, I suppose your voice gets clearer depending on all the things that you let go, and also your sensitivity to language and words, specific words. I remember doing an exercise, Donald Mass, the
Agent, right?
agent, yeah, but he's also a brilliant writing teacher. He's really, really fantastic. And he did this amazing exercise where we picked a word and then we had to rewrite that word in the characters in various 5 or 6 or 10 different characters' voices. What word would they use under this circumstances? And that was really great in terms of also understanding my own voice, So the editing process, I think, is where that part of writing, that deepening and editing, clarifying what you mean, is very key for voice, I think.
Actually, that's a good point around editors, because I feel like good editors do not crush your voice. They make your manuscript better, but they don't turn those things into just generic language. And I'm very grateful to have had very good editors, and I've never had this experience, but I hear from some people where they work with an editor who just tries to polish off all the rough bits and make it so it's not even their voice anymore. So is part of creative confidence knowing who to work with as well, like to be strong enough in your author voice to say this person might not be the best person for me, or to just hold on to what's truly you, but also allow professionals to help you improve.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting that balance, and very much, voice is very much about balance. And specifically when we're talking about voice, I think in the more literal sense, editors, obviously, but our book design and stuff, that's all part of our voice. Our voice and our brand are very linked. And so everybody, now we're getting into sort of creative publishing and confidence around being a good creative publisher. And I think, those kinds of decisions, again, learning by doing, growing as you go and getting better at it and more confident in it, so that when you start out, you're playing safe, because, you need to. You've a lot to learn, and you're looking at other people in your genre, and to some degree you're copying them, or, not stealing like an artist all around you. Then there comes a point where you just want to break out of that. It begins to feel confining. And I think that's when you realize you've kind of found your voice as a publisher.
Yeah, so anything else on writing kind of voice? Because I wanted to talk about actual voice.
Oh, yeah, literally. Audio voice.
Yes, audio voice. So, yeah, I mean, part of our shows now are you and I talking about what's going on with us. And I have done the Kickstarter for Death Valley, which is a standalone thriller. And as part of that Kickstarter, I also have done my very first audiobook narrated by my voice clone through 11 Labs. Now, I've talked about doing a voice clone for years, and I've tried all kinds of different tools, and they've all been terrible, frankly terrible. No, not terrible, but just a tiny percentage of me. Now, this is amazing. It really is amazing, and I love it. And listening, I proofed it, and it was a very strange experience to proof a book where I wrote the words, but I did not speak the words, and yet I was listening to myself speaking the words. So it was my actual voice by my voice clone. Although I didn't read it, I did train it with my recordings. So it is me. But I guess I'm trying to say that I have thought for many years now that as soon as I could clone my voice, I would license it and I would have it out there as an employee making money for me. And I could do that right now. I could license my voice and anyone could use it. But in the process of proofing this book, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to do that. This is my actual voice and I need to keep it just for me. So you can do that on 11 Labs, create a voice clone and then not license it. You can just use it for yourself. So I found this very interesting, and I'm confident doing narration. I've narrated lots of nonfiction, short stories, but a full novel is a lot of work. So I wanted to ask you what you thought about this.
Well, first of all, to say that's fascinating because I've been listening to you talking about the cloning and licensing thing and, being disappointed across the years when things weren't technologically there. So how interesting that when they are there, you don't want to do it.
Yeah, but that's good. We can change our minds, can't we?
Oh, totally. 100%. For me, you've always been all in on audio, and audio's always been more of a secondary thing for me. I was interested, even in the notes for this, you said something, you have a voice brand, and I'm thinking, have I? I just don't think of myself, even though I've been podcasting practically weekly for over a decade.
Yeah, exactly.
So interesting. But yeah, I've been waiting kind of for the tech to improve on this, and I had started getting my novels narrated, and it wasn't, they're good enough is how I describe it, but I'm certainly not over the moon about them. So I've been waiting for this moment myself. I haven't had a chance to get stuck in there. I need to dive more deeply into what I actually feel about voice cloning now that has become a thing, a real thing that I'm will explore and see what I want to do with it. I know that I love AI as a way to kind of extend my reach and make work more accessible and all of that, and save energy and, do tasks that I wouldn't do or do them better or whatever. But I have questions at this point because I haven't gone there yet about the cloned voice. Voice is tone and pronunciation and obviously all of that. And I really, if you say it's great, I know it is great because I know you've been waiting and I know you wouldn't say it was great if it wasn't. I'm just wondering about, will it feel like me to me? It certainly obviously felt like you to that degree. So that whole thing of the energy behind the words, I feel like I'll definitely want to do my own poetry with the human voice, and then probably do some voice cloning for nonfiction teachings and stuff like that, because I haven't done any of that. And then fiction, we'll see in between. You can always get another voice to read your fiction anyway. I mean, I think people are used to that, and there's some attraction to maybe having a novel read by the author, but read by the author's clone isn't going to possibly have the same attraction. So I'm not sure. These are things I need to kind of think about.
Yeah, and it's interesting to come up against things where we thought we knew what we thought and then we don't. So I would just encourage people there as well, because Orna actually said the words there, "I love AI."
Did I?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, no. You know what that means.
People are going to quote you and just put it all over the internet. But no, you said to extend your reach, and you used it for specific things, and I'm the same. But and I think changing our minds around what we're happy with in terms of AI usage is really important. Like if, especially how good the tools are now. I've been using the O3 model, which is just fantastic. This, like I said, this 11 Labs, the voices are brilliant. And I think I had 120 people buy the audiobook on Kickstarter, and that will be out everywhere, and on Spotify and on all these places in June, along with the ebook and the paperback and all that. So that's part of my launch process now. The other, I guess, just as a side note in terms of things that are happening in audio, Spotify just announced that they're changing Find Away Voices to in audio, and then there'll be Spotify for authors. And so I see that as them really expanding the possibilities for what we can do with audio. The other thing that's happened is the 11 Labs, the 11 Reader. Authors have started earning from 11 Reader now, where you can put up, you put the EPUB into Reader, and then you can use any voice to narrate it, including famous actors and actresses. And I've talked about this too. Do you remember me saying this when I was like, why do I have to listen to a business book in an American male voice? Why can't I change the voice of the audiobook like I can change the voice of my, Google Maps or my Siri or whatever? I can change the voice. Why can't we do that with audiobooks? And this is the app. This is the app that can do that. So you choose whatever you want read. Some of them are books, and you can pay for a subscription, and then it will change the voice depending on what you want it to be. That's the first time we've had it. And so I feel like things are really changing in audio, and authors need to be aware that if you sign exclusive contracts, or if you have signed your audio rights, you can't take advantage of these new things. So we really have to start pushing, I think, for stratification of audio rights, for really thinking about what audio rights mean in this kind of world. Oh, also, I don't know if I told you this, but I signed my first traditional publishing audio contract for AI narration. So that is also happening.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think we also, just on the side note around Spotify and Find a Way, we are at ALLi investigating exactly what that means in terms of terms and conditions, because, Spotify hasn't been brilliant for musicians, and, we're not sure of the detail of that yet. And we will be having a podcast with Scott Curry from Find a Way in audio, whatever the new name is.
Yeah, whatever they are. but I think that's
in the next week or two. Yeah.
But I think that's actually the point, is that we cannot rely. It used to be like back when we started with ACX in 2014, I think was my first audiobook with ACX. That was the only choice we had in 2014. And I was signing, and many people signed royalty split deals with multi-year things. And many people have signed these contracts that lock them away with audio. And now, like, for example, I'm now making more money on YouTube for audiobooks, for some of my audiobooks, than I am through these other platforms. So I think with audio, my recommendation for people is to really try and be aware of how many ways you can make money with your audio. And as you say, be very careful about locking yourself into any particular platform.
Exactly. Non-exclusivity here as elsewhere. And also note that audio is where all the growth is happening at the moment in publishing. So not being in there means missing out on probably one of the easiest ways to find readers and develop a following.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, so I guess I also wanted to talk a bit more about AI usage. Again, why I'm quite obsessed about this is people are worried. I have people email me and they say, well, aren't you worried that the AI will, I don't know, change your voice, or the AI will impact the way that you want to create, or that if anybody is using AI to output the finished words, that those words won't be your voice. And this is why I keep coming back to creative confidence. I know what is me. I know, and I can work. I love my AI tools, and I can work with them, and they can amplify me, and I can become more creative. But because I know what is me and what is the machine, I know when we work together on things that I still know what is me. I actually find it so much purer in terms of my voice than when I've co-written things. And you and I have worked together before. We're so different in our approaches that we literally have to separate timings. So like Joe gets to do this time block, and Orna gets to do this time block, because we're so different. It's like we know exactly what we do. And I feel the same with the AI. It's like I don't need to worry about that, because I know what is me. And even if it gives me 20 ideas about something that I ask it, what are 20 plot ideas for this? My choice reveals my voice. I think that's why I'm confident. What about you?
Yeah, I think similar. And when I was thinking about this question, I was trying to think about why I feel also that beginners are not in great danger here. And it came to me that creativity is never about a particular tool. A tool can never make you, in inverted commas, creative, and it can't take your creativity away from you. Your creativity is innate, it's resilient, and it's always renewing itself. So there is nothing to worry about there, unless we absent ourselves through laziness or lack of care. So, tools don't block flow, but misalignment does. And it's understanding that, I think, then you're fine. Creative discernment is what you need to develop. It's a bit like in schools now. I don't know why they're still teaching facts and stuff to kids who can just look them up. What kids need so much is to be taught creative and critical skills, and they're not getting that in conventional education. And it's about unlearning a lot of our conventional education and, cultivating our creative discernment, that ability to choose when when you can ask, when you can get 100 ideas in a minute and 100 more in the next minute, discernment, it becomes very, very important. So cultivating your inner compass when you're starting out, I think, is done just as easily with AI tools around you as without. So at the beginning of any project, you start with you. And in the middle, you let the tool support you, your creative instincts, not replace, support. And in the end, you finish with you. And I don't just mean at the beginning, middle, and end of a project, but I mean to each stage. So that, for example, when brainstorming, you begin with your own ideas, then you ask the AI. Then between the two of you, you finalize your conclusions. And very likely, very often, I certainly find that I come up with some mix of the two. So, rather than saying AI is a voice killer every step of the way, each step of the way asking, is it flattening my voice here or is it amplifying it? So the other thing I would like to say about this, and I know that a lot of authors are saying don't say that you work with AI, because the second you do, you just unleash a load of hate. But I actually think it's important that we are not ashamed of using these tools. I think it helps us all if we're open about it. It's about sharing your work and how you do your work. And if you have used it in an authentic way, creative way, you'll be proud of what you've done. And also, I think knowing that you're going to be truthful about it can challenge us to make more creative effort along the way as we use the tools. So that's just my opinion there, because I know that a lot of AI positive people are saying to me, I'm not going to tell anybody because basically I'm scared of what everybody's going to say.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I've had my share of AI hate since I have been vocally pro AI since 2016. I mean, it's crazy that it's almost a decade since I've been talking about this on my podcast. And it's funny how I remember back and how people were saying I was completely crazy and what the hell was I talking about? And and now look where we are. But no, I mean, and it was actually 2 years ago when I put out my post on the AI assisted artisan author. That was 2 years ago. So I'm absolutely with you. I talk about this all the time and I love it and it helps me do amazing things. So yeah, don't have a problem with that. I did also want to talk about voice as in real voice, because due to all these things going on, I recently also rebooted my books and travel podcast after a 2-year break. And there are a few episodes up already. So there's almost 100 episodes now. And in fact, Orna has talked about intimate war and Ireland on my books and travel podcast, wherever you're listening to this. And I wanted to come back to the podcast because for me, that show, it really is my obsessions, as we said earlier. It is my voice because I am doing it for real. I'm also doing videos, which are going on my J.F.Penn author YouTube channel in order to double down on being human, to really just lean into those things that underpin my fiction and also my memoir. So a lot more stuff on pilgrimage and all of that kind of thing. And this idea of home, which is probably will be my next memoir. So yeah, I wanted to bring that up because it is my actual voice, but also it's part of the creative confidence. And again, sort of coming back to something. Now, when people quit stuff, so I stopped that show 2 years ago, it was right to stop when I did stop. And now it is right to return. So we can quit things, we can restart things. And I guess that confidence is when knowing when to stop and also when to lean back in. And I just had this intuitive sense of, I want to do this again. This fulfills me creatively and also underpins the human themes of my work.
Yeah, and I'm having quite a similar experience because, again, AI facilitated the Go Creative series, which I kind of completely put on hold while I focused on poetry and fiction, has come back to me. And again, I'm approaching it through voice for now, just doing a podcast. And I had begun all that process just before my big life event took over. And it was a big change and a big shift, which at every level, really, including social media shutdowns and changing all my autoresponders to reflect the different voices I was talking about earlier. And I'd be picking up that kind of big job now, and I definitely feel that the real voice is very important as we go forward with AI. So it's AI in this case is actually facilitating me to talk and use my actual voice. It's not about using AI voice.
Yeah. And it's interesting, your Go Creative stuff. When you put that down, I felt, as your friend and someone who knew a lot of the work in that there was so much you wanted to do. You had all these book ideas and there were lots of workbooks. And one thing I'm finding with the AI tools, especially O3, is that it is helping me with my chaos. I can give it a load of unstructured thoughts. Like I gave it like 30,000 words of unstructured thoughts about this idea of home and Somerset and weird stuff, load of weird stuff, and just said, okay, I'm really lost in this project. What can you wrangle from this, essentially? What insights can you bring? And this being lost in the material, I feel like that's part of just the creative experience, but also having a tool to help kind of find a way again. And I might not use the way that it suggested, but it really helped me to kind of put my arms around something that felt too big for my brain. Is that an experience you've had?
Yes, I have had it with this, because the very nature of creativity and how you talk about it, do you talk about it from the self-helpy, the spiritual, the neuroscience, there's so many different aspects to it. And like that, I got lost. I lost my voice in there. I wasn't sure which voice I wanted to kind of bring through. And AI, just in a question and answer session with ChatGPT, really helped me to work all that through in terms of that different, right down to platforms. I was getting very uncomfortable with Meta and, suggesting platforms that will be better for me and more aligned with the people who are likely to be interested and all that kind of stuff. So I would not be doing this project now at all. And the big part of it is not for now, it's for later on. But even the bits that I'm doing or bringing it back, it wouldn't be back on my desk if it wasn't for the ability to do these things, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to return to the main points, having this creative confidence to try new things. So to try AI, to play with it and to know this is me, this is not me. Or as Orna said, I'm not comfortable with this, or I am comfortable with this. This is all part of just learning and growing and trying things and finding it over time, I guess. Any last thoughts, Orna?
Yeah, again, thinking of the beginners, I'd like to say that, it's not that you don't know at the beginning. Your creative awareness is there, and it manifests itself in what you like, what you're attracted to, what comes easy to you, what you enjoy, the themes that keep recurring for you, your values, all of that. It is there. It's there then at the start as much as it is later on as you go through. But the difference is that at the beginning, doubt can knock you off. So as you prove yourself to yourself, it gets easier to hold the faith. That's the only thing that gets easier, really. Everything else stays difficult. So at the beginning, it's about finding ways to get over the doubt enough to keep going.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you found this useful today. And of course, you can leave comments wherever you're listening or on that ALLi blog at Self-Publishing Advice. And I guess that's it for now, Orna.
That's it for now. We'll be back again with a new topic next time. And until then, everyone, happy writing.
Happy publishing.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Self-Publishing with ALLi, the podcast that brings you all the advice, news, and inspiration an indie author needs today. Thanks to our podcast sponsor, BookVault.app. They enable authors to sell high-quality print-on-demand books, including stunning special editions, directly to readers worldwide. Our creative self-publishing stream is brought to you by Orna Ross's Go Creative program, helping authors harness the power of creative flow in writing and publishing. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our association and become a self-publishing ally. You could do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.